All right, and we're off. We are live. So, as we've said throughout this whole week, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's decided to join us on this virtual journey. My name's Taylor. I'm from Belonging Grant, and alongside a team of awesome community connectors and agency folks from Brantford Grant, we kind of pulled together to put on this wonderful week of events. And we just want to say thank you. Obviously, the 2021 Asset-Based Community Development Symposium looks really different from the lovely in-person events we've been able to host in the past. But this virtual space has offered us a really exciting opportunity to be able to connect and engage with like really brilliant, creative, playful, and resilient community connectors and community builders from all over the place, including our speaker today, who's joining us from Seattle. So we want to just say some big thank yous to our community partners and also to the Ontario Trillium Foundation. As we begin today's conversation about connecting to ourselves and connecting to our communities and to our neighborhoods, it's really important that we connect to the context of the histories and the futures of the places where we live. Across this amazing digital network that we've cultivated throughout this past week, there are numerous stories of land and treaties and stewardship. As hosts, we're located on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. This is part of the Haldeman Tract and is understood within the two-row Wampum Belt Covenant and Dish with One Spoon Treaty. These treaties instruct us all to honor the original peoples of this land as the stewards of this space, to embrace and celebrate the ecology and networks of nature and animals that grow here, and to live lives of peaceful non-interference. We urge each of you to become familiar with the treaties and the nations of the land where you live in order to more wholly inform the work that you do and to more deeply connect to the concepts of community that we're talking about today. As always, we would love it if you could drop in the chat a bit more about where you're joining us from today and also how you found out about this event. We would also like to acknowledge the lineage of disability justice advocates whose work for the cultivation of more inclusive online spaces has informed so many of the ways that we're able to easily connect during COVID-19. We're grateful to the generations of thinkers and activists who came before us to instruct and inform the resources, accessibility tools, and the social distancing techniques that have become a lifeboat to our communities during these distance times. Again, as always, we encourage engagement in this space. So feel free to use the chat, hit the little reaction emoji buttons when folks share info that maybe inspires you, and feel free to participate in the Q&A, whether you're joining us from Zoom or from YouTube. And again, with that in mind, I would just encourage folks to stay muted while others are talking. So without further ado, let me pass things off to this wonderful speaker who's joining us this afternoon. Welcome, Sam Reed from the Seattle Department of Neighbourhoods.
Thank you, Taylor. I'm going to try and share my screen here. So hold on. I'm hoping that worked.
Yep, we can see.
Okay. So I just want to thank you, Taylor, and thank you everyone from the symposium for inviting me to join you. Whenever I start these things, first, I'm Sam Reed. My pronouns are he, him. I am the interim communications manager at the Seattle Department of Neighbourhoods. I'm actually in our office for the first time in months and months. I just needed to escape my home for something like this, so I didn't have to compete with my children and my dog and everything else. First and foremost, I always like to start these things by saying that I'm not an expert by any means. I just consider myself an explorer, and all the work I'm going to talk about is really the work of so many people beyond myself. And so I just like to put that out there. And I'm also want to just stress that I'm not a formal person, so this really to me I want it to feel more like a conversation. So if at any point you want to just stop me and say, hey, I have a question about that, totally feel free. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But this little project, Reimagine Seattle storytelling project, is why, I am here. It's what Taylor saw and kind of inspired her to reach out to me. But I think it's important to understand that this project didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, it was most certainly a circumstance of environment and a lot of both intentional and accidental growth. And most importantly, it grew out of an ever expanding kind of understanding of the power of stories and a lot of listening to people with vastly different lived experiences than myself. So I kind of just want to talk a little bit about storytelling in general, and the power of it and what it's meant in my life and how I've used it in my work, and how I find it particularly important and valuable in working in government. And I saw this quote randomly like last week, and I just love it so much because it encapsulates really everything that this is about. That stories really drive everything. They drive our lives, they drive our identities, they form and shape our decisions and our personalities and our families. And when it comes to government, it's really important who tells those stories and who holds the power of those stories. And so that's a lot of what I kind of am getting at today. So here's a little graph of me. So here's a bunch of data, facts about me. Does this tell my story? I hope not. And I'm sure it can allow people to make a lot of assumptions about me and guesses about me. I'm sure it allows people to try and market things to me. But I use these facts and this data as a way to say, this is a lot of times how government tells stories and how government relates to people and identifies with people and pigeonholes people. We use data like this. And it doesn't really have much to do with my lived experience, though it may be, all of this may be true. It also has nothing to do with any choice that I've made in my life. So if someone used this to try to tell my story or understand me or relate to me in some way, I think they'd be pretty disappointed in the results, as would I. So beyond that data is actually a pretty complex and rich narrative, you know, a patchwork of stories over time that blend and overlap and distort and transform to shape the person that is talking to you right now. That's me in the little Mobile gas outfit with my family. I grew up in Idaho. I was a really sensitive kid. I had amazing, loving parents, still do. My dad they were both had us when they were really young. They weren't even adults themselves when they became parents. My dad is a total jock. And the things I got from my parents were, from my father, he was this jock, but he was also this poet. He wrote poetry and he was an amazing writer and he had this incredible love for music. And my mom was incredibly creative and nurturing, and she kind of had this power to make everything magical. And as I was growing up in Idaho, you know, one of those things that, as you saw in my data, I was gay, and I grew up in Idaho in the 80s, which was, you know, pretty not the most welcoming place. And also getting to that whole idea of stories and representation, I had nothing to ground myself to in terms of representation in the stories that I was seeing out in the world. There was nothing there telling me or helping me understand and put together who I was, because I saw no examples of me. So the only thing, you know, growing up in Idaho, knowing that I was gay, was that, you know, gay people were abused and they were rejected and lonely and they got beaten up and died of AIDS. I mean, that was really what you knew of gay people growing up in Idaho in the 1980s. So that's the only representation I was giving, and it shows you the power of representation to shape someone's life. And I think if there is an example of the power of storytelling to transform the world, it's the phase after the 80s, the whole phase of the coming out movement that grew out of the era that I grew up in, and how all of those stories, as they started to pour out, completely transformed an entire culture. And I am one of the benefactors of that. I tried on a lot of identities as a kid, as many of us do. I just want to point out that where I'm dressed in the football, that is not my bedroom. I would never have a poster of Whitesnake in my bedroom. That is actually my brother's bedroom. But I tried a lot of different identities and finally landed on something that felt close to me. I got into theater and discovered storytelling even more. I was a big writer as a kid, and I loved telling stories. And then I got into theater and I learned how to tell stories. I moved to Seattle and started my own theater company. That's where I really cut my teeth as a storyteller, not just in terms of like building a world on stage, but also becoming a marketer and becoming a fundraiser for my own theater company and learning how to talk to people and build community and build relationships. And then I met my husband and life changed again. And I grew up, we adopted 2 kids out of foster care. And all these things together weave this really intricate story about me and who I am and all these things that shape me that goes so far beyond the data that you saw earlier. And I just want to point out that all of this, ultimately, what I do, even though whether I work in the government or in the arts sector, which I did work in the arts sector for many, many, many years as a marketing and fundraiser before I moved into the government sector. But throughout all of it, what I am ultimately is a storyteller, whether I'm on stage, whether I'm in an office, wherever I am. And I think the thing that's important to know, especially working in government, is that so often we use data and we use reports to relay information. But ultimately, the goal of stories is to impart experience, to use our language to put people there, to drive, because story drives everything. So that's where I ended up. And here, how I got into government. So I have always been a bit of a government wonk, but I was working in the arts sector for a really long time. And as the world was changing and I was seeing what was going on politically in our country and seeing this real kind of rupture in terms of people's relationship with government, I started to really want to do something different and to get out of the art sector and try something different. So I had a real curiosity to see if I could take what I had learned in the art sector, which was really about building bridges and building community and finding ways to engage people beyond just selling them a ticket. And I saw this opportunity in government to do something very similar, to come in and really see how we could build something new and build trust and build community. And then I stumbled upon the Department of Neighborhoods, and I learned about this place that seemed to be exactly what I was looking for, this kind of outlier in terms of local government. And I'm going to show you a video here that just is, this is one of the programs of our department that really just hooked me and is what actually lured me to want to apply here. And it's called the People's Academy for Community Engagement.
We're going to work on this fact sheet as a group. So the People's Academy for Community Engagement is a civic leadership development program put on by the Department of Neighborhoods. It's a 5-Saturday class, and what we do in PACE is teach you all about city government and how to influence decision makers in local government.
As a mother of a future scientist, I think it's very critical that we have a program like Home to Launch in every community.
Local government has a huge impact on your daily life, and you also have the most political power as an individual at the local level. So knowing how to navigate that system and make an influence in city government is really important.
This engagement class has given me, it almost feels like inside scoop of how to apply myself personally as a business owner and then as a caretaker of my community. As we know, we only have a few minutes to get your attention today, but in our proposal, those details are there. This part of stepping into the world of city and governance allows a voice of your own and the opportunities to see where those open doors are that to some degree have each of our names on them. To not just be someone on the outside looking into what's happening to us in our city, but to really walk through those doors and be a part of it.
So some of the things you can expect to learn in PACE are some of the harder skills of understanding government, so understanding the budget process, land use policy, but we also focus on some of the softer skills as well. So understanding how to skillfully engage conflict, building relationships with the media, and community organizing strategies as well.
This is what power is. It's something that is shared. It's something that you have to do together. It's bigger than writing a letter. It's bigger than a protest. We gotta do something, y'all. That's what power is, the ability to act.
Stay authentic. Have great ideas. Have not so great ideas. Bring your full self. Bring your ideas. The week spent with PACE, I believe, help fortify the truth of that your ideas are valuable, and here are the doors and the ways to step through.
So that was the program that really just sealed the deal for me in terms of wanting to work at this organization. The Seattle Department of Neighborhoods is this place that really is, I almost see it as a bridge between government and community. Here's a basic description of us on the screen, but we meet people where they are. We actually go out and we connect. We act as a bridge between government and community. We're kind of this kind of squishy place, I like to call it, where we're not about data, we're not about facts, we're really about building relationships. And the strength of our staff lies in our ability to build authentic and trusting relationships with community. I mean, that is at the heart of what we do. It's what allows us to learn from and understand and effectively engage with communities across the city, many of which have been historically harmed by government and continue to be harmed by government and institutional racism, among other things. We run a pea patch program, gardening program. We run a historic preservation program. We have a program called Community Liaisons, which you'll learn a little bit about later, where we contract with people all over the city from underrepresented communities to really be strategic partners with us and help us learn how to effectively engage with the communities they represent. We have the People's Academy for Community Engagement. We do Neighborhood Matching Fund and other grant programs. But to be honest, the majority of our work is behind the scenes. Most folks don't realize that our staff and our community liaisons are involved in projects and programs all over the city, providing community engagement and outreach support, ensuring that marginalized and underserved communities have voice and representation in city projects from beginning to end. It's an amazing place to work. It's a challenging place to work. And one of the things that I love about this place is how much they've bought in and believe in the power of storytelling and the power of relationships and building community with people. Even though we work in this very bureaucratic system that is still steeped in so many things that are harmful, that we really struggle day in and day out, every day to make a difference and to change that system. It's a really, really inspiring place to work. And one of those reasons is our belief in our day in and day out devotion to race and social justice. It's rooted in everything that we do. And it's not something that we see as just kind of individual incidents, but we really approach it as this is about systems. It's about systemic change. And one of the things that we've done together just in the 5 years that I've been here is we really decided to really hone in on what this means to us as a department, to really tackle it across every program and for every one of our employees and everyone that works here to buy into this work that we're doing. And we, because we have this tremendous belief that it is our responsibility as government, not just to not have racist policies or not to be racist, but to actually very much be anti-racist and to delve into the work of being anti-racist and everything that means. So we, as an entire team, we decided to create a kind of a plan for us, a roadmap. And we developed what we call our North Star goals. which is to put race and equity at the center of all decisions and actions, and to invest in the power of communities to forge their own solutions. These are pretty bold statements that there really are guides. And the thing that I think we all struggle with all the time is realizing that we're going to fail at these a lot, probably, but they're there to guide us. They're there to show us the direction that we need to go. And we have to be okay with knowing that we're going to fail, and this takes risk, and this takes creativity and innovation, and we're going to fall into traps. As a white man, I fall into a lot of traps almost every day and every week. But it's to learn to work together and figure out how to solve the problems and how to continue moving in this direction. And I really also just want to point out how important it is for me and for us, this last one, that we're investing in communities to forge their own solutions, not something that we're trying to create for people or solve for them, because we don't know. They know much better than we do on what the solutions that are going to work for them. So what does this mean? And here's, we also internally, this work isn't just about what we do in our programs and how we serve the community, but it's about how we work together as people in an office space. So we developed something called the Living System, which is, at the city of Seattle, race and social justice has been a big component of every department within the city for quite a while now. And there were these things called change teams where people would volunteer to serve on a committee in their department that was focused on race and social justice internally, and how that looks in the office space, how it looks in hiring. And we decided to take that one step further and to make it an entire staff, an entire department-wide thing that we all participate in. And we created these living systems work groups that everyone has to participate in some way or another. So we have a learning community, which is all about kind of exploring and learning about different things, different communities in our city. There's a focus on hiring and recruiting. There's a policy work group focus. And there are also caucuses. There's a white caucus and a people of color caucus. And when this first came up, especially the white caucus, I think a lot of us were really nervous. Like just that phrase alone made us go, I don't know that I want to be a part of something like that. Until we realized that the whole point of us gathering as a white caucus is to do the work and to not put the burden on our fellow staff members of color to do the work for us, to really go and educate ourselves about what we need to do and how we can be more effective, and really how we can work better as people to dismantle white supremacy within our own structures. This has transformed the way that we work as an office, and it has also been incredibly challenging and exhausting, but so helpful and inspiring at the same time. It's a lot. So what I'm getting at is that how does this, everything I just told you, how does the communications team exist and function within this system? And ultimately, it again comes down to stories and the power of stories, and knowing how much influence we have as a communications team at a city department, at a government agency, to affect the stories that are being told, who gets to tell them. So a lot of it is changing the way that we talk, using simple language, being responsive and honest and transparent and approachable in everything that we do, trying a lot of experimentation. So, you see a smattering of things here on the screen. These are all things that are from different stories we've done. That one in the top left is me dressed as an ice cream cone. Going out in community and really just building relationship and trying to strip away that pretense that people have with government, especially in a lot of the communities that we work in that have a very strong distrust for government for very good reasons. So we really, as a team, just embrace storytelling and personality, and we prioritize building trust and building relationships in everything that we do. Oops, I'm going to go back here. So, and then I'm going to show you another video, and this really illustrates, and I'll talk a little bit more about it after the video, but how we started to approach our work, and a big learning lesson for us as a team was when we wanted to do this video, and how we ended up working with community, and they really drove the content of the video and the story that we were ultimately going to tell, even though it was one of our own programs. And this is our community liaison program.
Community liaisons are from underserved and underrepresented communities here in Seattle. They represent people of color, immigrants and refugees, people experiencing homelessness, seniors, youth, young adults, and people with disabilities. The Seattle landscape is very diverse, but it's also losing its essence because of gentrification. So community liaisons are advisors. It is people embedded in the community. People are the dot connectors, the bridge builders, and people trust them. And when you have that trust and that establishment, it's so much easier to navigate the systems that are oftentimes complex and hard to understand.
My name is Sabrina Abdullah. I'm from the Cham refugee community. Cham people are a sub-ethnic group in Vietnam. We had our own kingdom, but once we lost our land, the people migrated to live in Vietnam, Cambodia, as well as along the west coast of the United States. As I was growing up here, I noticed that our community was very much closed off. We were very tight knit, but we weren't really aware of what was going on in our city. And so as I grew up, I went to college. I was trying just to get more involved within the spaces that I was in. I didn't really even see myself as being like a spokesperson for my community ever. Like, I'm a girl, I'm young, I don't know. I thought it could just be someone that was older, had more experience, because it is intimidating being in a room where it's like city officials, there are people that have way more experience than I do. But to hear that my input is valuable, I think it just helps me build my confidence as to say like, okay, I have a voice, I have things I want to say, and there are people that are listening to me. Youth are very visual. It's, yes, less words, more pictures. So youth being on the media advocating for the census, whether that's like visually showing it on an infographic or creating media that's specifically in multiple languages to show faces of like, here are people who are like me.
I belong Somali community. Somali community is a African community, Muslim community. You know, we started coming to Seattle early 1990. The people I belong to, they already feel different right now. When you hear the news, what's going on in politics, alienation. So the city can use this program to connect them, to make them feel they are cared about, and the city know them, they are there.
They help us do our job better, like as simple as that. They're the heart and soul of the program. I mean, just speaking to you right now, I feel so humbled and honored to even be in this position, because without the liaisons always giving us feedback, always telling what is going on there in the community, helping us understand the community dynamics and all the nuances, we will not be doing a good job as city planners, as city staffers at all.
I am really thankful to be a community liaison, because from the Cham refugee community, we are very hidden even within our own neighborhood. So to have a seat at the table, to be visible, and that I'm even talking to the city about my community, a lot of the elders I know are supporting me because I'm a product of my community. Nice. So I'm really excited to see how I can grow in both my position in the city as well as within my own community as a youth lead.
From my involvement through community liaison to City of Seattle, they now can navigate more easily to city resources. That is important to know the city, don't ignore them, and through liaison, they get information, what they need. And that gives them hope, you know, that they belong to Seattle.
So that was a video that I worked on. I think it was in 2019, and I started approaching making that video, and I mapped out this entire plan of what I wanted to do to talk about this program. And one of my colleagues of color called me out, and she said, have you talked to the community about how they want this, what story they want to tell, and what they want the video to look like? And I was just totally had one of those moments where I was just stopped dead in my tracks. I'm like, no, I haven't. You're so right. Because I was just rushing. I wanted to get this done and I was excited about it. So I completely stepped back and I started to go out and I met with community members. I met with Sabrina and Mahamud, who you see in the video. And I sat down with them and I said, what should this look like? What is the story you want to tell? How do you want to tell the story? Where should we film? Who do you want us to talk to? And really, I let them kind of drive that process. And ultimately, it led to this such a better story than I could have ever done on my own. And they graciously invited me to these events that you saw in the video, to the night market where you see Sabrina here, and Mahamud to his event at the Somali Community Center. And it led to such a more rich experience and a more rich storytelling than I could have ever done on my own. And it just showed me the power of really just letting go of power and sharing the power and letting community come in and really shape the story that they want to tell. Because that ultimately, as a Department of Neighborhoods, that is our job. It's not necessarily to tell our own story. Our whole story is about community. So they should be driving it more than we are. So it was a huge learning point for me. And we were getting ready to do all these things and really kind of move in that direction. And then 2020 hit. And as you know, everything totally changed everywhere and slowed down. And there was a lot of re-examining of our work and our place. And it became clear, even more clear, how much storytelling mattered and how much who told those stories and the stories that we were hearing mattered, especially as we went through what happened last year and everything that happened with COVID, everything that happened with the murder of George Floyd and the racial and social justice protests that took over the entire culture last year in our city. And what grew out of that for us, which is, it brought a lot of us at the city closer together in ways that broke down silos and allowed us to work together. We created this kind of interdepartmental team called Seattle Together, where we just came together and worked. And really in the beginning, it was focused on building social cohesion, helping people connect to each other as we were all at the beginning of the pandemic, focused a lot on seniors and BIPOC community. And we've just focused on creating programming and stories and amplifying the amazing community work that was going on out in the community in terms of mutual aid and people just helping each other, to really give a platform to that and a voice to that and amplify that in every way that we could. We did a lot of public art projects. So we were just finding ways that we could come together as a city and better be, break out of our silos and serve community in a much more authentic way and really focused on creating belonging and connection, particularly for BIPOC communities in this city. And I put our values up here because, you know, a lot of times people put values and it's like, okay, that's great. But the thing about these is that we try to live by them. And it has really shaped the way we move forward as a city, as a department, to really this idea of creative reimagination, shared power, failing forward, and risk-taking and collaboration are really, what this did is it forced us to model all of these things, not only for ourselves and our team members, but as a department and as a communications lead at a city department, I took it upon myself that I need to model this for other people at the city. I need to model this behavior and really show how we're tackling this, so that we can ultimately get to systems change. These are the strategies of the Seattle Together kind of cohort. And the most important one to me, aside from the storytelling, is really about no matter what we're doing in this space, from here on out, everything that we're doing has to be about transforming government's relationship with community and building new systems that are more equitable and that center community needs. So through this process, we started storytelling again. And we really wanted to just provide a platform for communities to tell their own stories about how they were navigating this time and this space and all the challenges that were 2020.
I have all the trappings that make me think I'm doing well. I have friends who love me, I have family, I'm employed, I have my health. But in point of fact, I'm quite unwell. Because I know that I feel like I've won some sort of pandemic lottery that I wasn't trying to play. When my Asian brothers and sisters are experiencing racism, my Black brothers and sisters are still being killed in the street. And so I'm not well. But Seattle, we have a real opportunity. Right now, we can create the society we want. We can create a more inclusive economy and a more inclusive society by insisting that we support all people and that we not leave people behind in our economy. We can see it being laid bare right now, and we have a real opportunity to change it. And I really hope we do that together.
Rodriguez.
And I'm Luis Rodriguez. We are the owners of the Station Coffee Shop in Seattle, Washington.
And we're here to answer questions for Seattle Together Stories.
Hashtag.
First question being, how are you really doing? And what are you learning?
Oh, I want to say we're great, right?
Yes.
All right. We have learned that the love and support from our friends, family, and community is all we needed.
Absolutely. Second question being, what has provided joy, solace, and connection at this time?
Basically the same. For me, for us, community, love, unity, and definitely family.
Most definitely. Number 3, what are your hopes and aspirations for Seattle looking forward? What is the world you wish to live within?
Both questions, I want to say the same answer. Less to non-violence, less to non-white supremacy, and definitely less to non-capitalism.
I think I'm a bit anxious about the new normal, but I'm very, very optimistic about it. You know, I think that Seattle is a very, very innovative city, and I'm happy about that. I feel like if there's any way for us to prevail and any way for us to kind of like gain some of the same emotions that we had from some activities we might not be able to do anymore, like I think that it's totally possible. I was even thinking about stuff like silent discos and how those are probably going to be pretty prevalent because everyone can get their 6 feet of distance and really dance it out and just have their headphones on and go crazy. I really think that like stuff like that is going to be popular. And I'm excited for stuff like that. So I think that if there's a will, there's a way, and Seattle's going to make a way for sure.
So those were stories that we just started gathering. I think most of that was in the late spring, early summer of 2020, really just reaching out to community members and trying to get their take on what we were all going through. And then Seattle Together formed in more also cohesive programming like Love in the Time of COVID, which was, we hosted this twice, actually this wasn't our department, but we just helped support it. Which was really just a gathering space for storytelling and tackling topics from Indigenous sovereignty to Black love and immigrant rights and prison abolition. It was a chance for people to gather virtually and learn and storytell and share solidarity with each other. The Office of Arts and Culture did this whole public art campaign, Public Art Comes to Your Front Yard, where they hired commissioned artists to create these beautiful signs that were all about kind of what we were all going through and being Seattle Together. And they were put in public spaces all throughout the city, just kind of yard signs. But all of this together was an amazing work, and it's work that's still happening. The Seattle Together cohort is still going strong, and it's leveraged the budgets of 6 departments and staff from 11 different departments coming together to really focus on how can we work better as a city, how can we be better storytellers, how can we develop more equitable community partnerships. And ultimately, this experience of Seattle Together really just enforced and inspired more how much storytelling really just drives everything. And for me, it really became about this statement, which I heard in a story a couple of months ago, but everyone deserves the agency to tell their own stories. That really struck me. And it is what led me to this, which was the Reimagine Seattle storytelling project. So late of fall last year, a lot of what was happening in 2020 was, at the city government level, there was a lot of conversation about recovery and rebuilding and what are things going to look like after the impacts of 2020, and not just the pandemic, but the racial unjust and really reckoning with all of that. So elected officials and city staff, they were working hard to reimagine a new way forward for Seattle, to take advantage of all of this kind of disruption and really shake things up and use it as an opportunity to create a healthier, more equitable city. And as that work was happening and I was listening to all this and going to all these meetings, what I wanted was to provide a public platform where community voices could help shape that conversation in some way, where it could really elevate personal stories and unique perspectives on what the future of our city could and should be, so that it wasn't just all of us, all of these city folks or government people sitting in a room trying to figure this out, but really what is the public platform for community members to have a voice in that, and for them to tell their stories and them to tell us what they want the city to look like. So I ended up reaching out to about 24 artists, or I'm sorry, 24 artists, community members, artists, writers, community advocates, particularly from communities that were underrepresented, underserved, or had a history of being harmed by government. And I just said, hey, I have some money. I want you to tell your story. And I didn't provide any kind of prescriptive of how they chose to tell that story, what format they chose to use to tell that story. I just provided a framework and I said, I want to know how this year has impacted you or your community, and what you want this city to look like in the future. And that was pretty much it. And I said, beyond that, it's yours. I just want to be here to support you. We're going to give you this platform. We'll publish this. We'll create this campaign around it, and we'll push it out. And we ended up having, I think, just over 24 stories. And they ranged from everything to written pieces. Many of them were written pieces, to videos, to a podcast, to audio files, to artwork. It was an amazing, amazing thing. And I'm going to show you some examples of it in the next few slides, so you can see the kind of rich texture that it provided us.
My hope for our city is that we get enough people in place who can identify the problems and care enough about the problems to fix them, or to find people to convene, not just committees, but like action coalitions to actually do things. So I feel like we do have this progressive and radical ideology. But like you were saying, like, I want to see us really fully embody that. If this is our value, if we believe that all human beings are worthy of dignity and respect, how can we live into our values in a way where, like, when you step into the city of Seattle, it is known. You can feel it. It's not something that we have to debate about or discuss, because that is the culture of our city. I don't want to desecrate the beautiful artwork that is taken place, that's been devoted to Black Lives Matter, but I would like to reimagine the scope of what Black Lives Mattering can be, to not only be about Black death. What would it be like to have portraits of living Seattle residents? What would it be like to
have Black futurism exhibitions on the sides of buildings, what would it be like to feel celebrated and to feel like healing and our recovery were the center of focus, not solely our trauma and our murders.
I dream of a world where our elders are held with honor. I dream of a world where there are no more nursing homes, where every elder is held by community until their last day on earth. I dream of a world where every person is valued for their uniqueness, not their conformity. I dream that one day I'll die. I dream that when that day happens, it's peaceful, and that I can go there without fear. This morning I woke up with a cold, a little bit of nasal drip, and in these strange times, thoughts like, will I be here tomorrow? Will this cold be the end of me? Cross my mind. And I think I'll probably be here tomorrow and the day after. But there is one thing I am certain of. I am in a state of decomposition. Every day I'm a little older. Certainly every day death is a little closer. I dream of a world where I can walk with that knowledge, with joy in my heart, with a constant remembering of the inevitability of that fact. I'm grateful for Seattle. I'm grateful to call this place home. It is the city I choose to be in for as long as I can imagine. A home.
So that was just a small sampling of what came out of the Reimagine Seattle storytelling project. And I have to say that that project really transformed me and transformed the way I see us moving forward as a communications team and how we invest in community and invest in community stories. It allowed me to begin building relationships with people in the community that can become storytellers and work with us on a regular basis. It's been such a transformative project. So I think, to close out, I felt like I should give a little kind of nitty-gritty tips for whether they're helpful or not. But it just helps me in talking to other people in the city and even people on our staff that don't see themselves as communications people, but to really find a way to build storytelling into your projects. So the first and foremost thing is just getting people bought in to this idea of the need and the power of storytelling and how it can impact you and your organizations and your programs, and to find ways to make it as easy as possible to do that. So one thing is just to identify ways that storytelling can really help you illuminate your goals and build opportunities for capturing stories into your timelines as you move forward. And at any point, you have an opportunity to really, get visuals, get audio, get quotes, and focus on, this goes back to that first slide about the data about me versus the story about me. Really focus on telling a story rather than just relaying information. What's the story you want to tell and why do you want to tell it, and who gets to decide which story it is and how you tell it? That's a really, really important question that I think gets forgotten too often. Who gets to decide? Identifying the values the story will illuminate. Always ask yourself if community is at the center of the story. And is this the story that that particular community wants you to tell or wants to tell? Who is the audience? How do you hope to impact them? And who is the protagonist in your story? This was a big one for me. And I wrote this here. If it's not the city, if it is, then there's something wrong. The city should always be a supporting character, even if the story is about your own program and what you're doing as the department. Ultimately, we should not be the protagonist. It should be the community. And then really identifying those key people in the community and getting them involved and getting their buy-in in what you're trying to do. And this, back to the community liaison video, that's where I kind of learned the importance of that, and letting them drive the narrative and drive what that story is and helping make the decisions about how and what story we're telling. Determining the best vehicle for telling the story. I mean, the Reimagine Seattle project showed me that there are so many different ways that people can tell a story and so many different mediums, and they're all equally impactful and effective. So it's just finding the ones that work best for what your needs are and what you're trying to do. And ultimately, and this is the last one, is one that we're fully embracing here on our team, is really allocating budget to commission community members to be the storytellers, to share that power and let community come in and really help determine the direction and the stories and be the crafters of the stories themselves. So that is what I have. So again, I just want to thank you all for allowing me this space and this time, and I hope it was helpful. And here is my contact information. If you ever want to reach out or have any questions or just want to have a conversation, please always feel free to reach out to me. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Sam. This has been fantastic. I appreciate everything that you've shared and the way that you took us on this journey. It was really fantastic. I know there's lots of comments and questions in the chat. Do you mind if I read a couple of those out to you?
No, please do, because I couldn't see the chat when I was doing the presentation. So
for sure, yeah. So the first question is, do you have a participatory budget? Like, is the budgeting participatory in Seattle?
We have, so for the last 4 years, we've run a program called Your Voice, Your Choice here in our department that is a participatory budgeting model. And it has been focused on small scale park and street improvements. The question is very timely because we're actually, one of the things that grew out of last year is there was a budget set aside to part of the money that came out of the police department, which is then supposed to move into programming for BIPOC communities. It's like a $30 million budget set aside for participatory budgeting. That moved into our department. So we're actually starting that process of working on that right now. It's a huge, huge undertaking.
Wow, that's fantastic and exciting, and I'm sure very nerve-wracking and challenging. So, wow. The next question is, how does your organization engage in elections or voting?
We don't. That is not our, I mean, we encourage people to vote, but we don't we try to completely stay outside of politics in every way. What we do is we encourage and educate people on how to actively engage in the civic process. That's a lot of what the People's Academy for Community Engagement is about. And it's a lot of the work we also do as a communications team, because we really see our role as not just mending the tear between government and community, but really finding ways to give community access points to understand how local government even works and the steps that are involved, or in how to be part of public comment, how to get involved in every step of the way. So I think in terms of like the political process, that is our entry point. It's not necessarily politics. It's really just helping people understand how to navigate the system and the bureaucracy and all the steps along the way.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like so inspired by the fact that there's like internal work around systems navigation happening to support community. That's incredible. The next question is, how are stories shared between diverse communities within Seattle? And how are hearing the stories of other neighbors building connection around shared goals?
How are stories shared? So many different ways. And I think that's, that's been one of the amazing things about working with like the community liaison program. Because I think for a long time, people look at that program and they assume, oh, that's just a way for the city to get information out to particular communities that they need to get information out to. But ultimately, the community liaisons they are guides and they are teachers for us as city staff and city departments. They are the ones that provide us strategy. They help us understand how communities are getting work done, how they're sharing information. So there's no one answer to that. Depending on the community, there are so many different ways that people are sharing stories and relaying information. And that's one of the challenges of working communications for a city department, is that there's not one answer. You have to do all kinds of work. You have to really be specific about what you're doing, who you want to talk to, why you want to talk to them, because there are so many different ways that you're going to have to, in order to do that effectively, there are so many different ways that you're going to have to approach that depending on who you're really trying to talk to.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. From YouTube, somebody asked, you mentioned something around best practices in storytelling, that being a document. It sounds like something that would be helpful to many of us. Is that a resource that is shared?
I can share it. Yeah, I mean, I could send this over to you, Taylor, I guess. And yeah, I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, and I have, for folks who are joining us on Zoom, I have a list of all the emails, so I'll be able to send it out that way if that's something folks are into. The next question is, often staff of a city work hard with good intentions. Oh, I think this is a comment, sorry. With good intentions to change and shape a city, but you are sharing a wonderful story, Sam, about how a city and its people have changed you and others who work for the city. That's fantastic. And then somebody else commented, I appreciate the reflection on who is the protagonist and why. Perfect. Another person asking if they can access the document. So that's great. There's a lot of interest around that. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and use your voice if that's something you're into. All right.
I guess I do have a question or something I'm thinking about. So I'd done some work in community food, and there was some research done around where community food projects live across municipalities in North America, and they've done some research on it. I'm just wondering if there's such a thing, or if anybody knows there's such research done in regards to community development or asset-based community development and where it usually lives. I'm intrigued because you're one department. It seems like you're one group of people doing and not spread out across different silos within a municipality. So I'm just curious if anybody knows that. Does that make sense?
I don't know if I got your specific question. I'm sorry.
I guess I'm fascinated that you're one department in a municipality, and folks that are doing the work that you're doing aren't spread across many different departments in a municipality. And I was just wondering if that's how common that was. And I guess through a comic book lens, your origin story.
Well, so interestingly enough, there are other people in other departments doing kind of the engagement work that we do, but and this is one of the challenges of our department is, in the time that I've been here, we're becoming much more of a kind of centralized hub for outreach and engagement for the city. So other departments will contract with our department so that they can get the support of our staff, our outreach and engagement staff, and our community liaisons in particular. That model is helpful in some ways and frustrating in others, because it puts us at this place where it feels like we're doing the work of other departments, but it's not necessarily for our own projects or our own. And so sometimes it can be competing and frustrating because other departments work very differently from us and have different relationships with communities. So it's about, I think the challenge for us always is, how do we maintain that authenticity and relationship with our community when we're not always in control of the projects and programs that we're reaching out to them about? It's certainly a kind of a hard navigation sometimes, but I don't know if that answered your question, but.
No, it did. It's maybe the grass, and also I think what's important is maybe the grass is always greener. You think it's going to be, you think it's going to be perfect if all the people are together, but maybe not so much.
Yeah, yeah. And another part of the challenge is, we also we're called very often to work closely with the mayor's office on various programs or projects or outreach. And so, and as you know, I mean, working with a political association, when you're a department that tries to root itself in community and authenticity and being that trusted advocate, it creates a lot of friction there as well, which we can't always control. But so yeah, it's a really challenging and hard place to be in sometimes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. I see Linda, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, that leads into my question, Sam, is that I really admire the work that your department's doing. And I do like the fact that other city departments, you seem to have buy-in at the staff level for other city departments. But I'm wondering if you can speak to the buy-in at, you just mentioned the mayor's office, but certainly from council and from a budgeting perspective. I know I myself have done a lot of this kind of advocacy work, but it's whether you actually get heard around the council table, and especially when it comes to a budgeting perspective. So I'm wondering if you could speak to kind of maybe tips and tricks on how to get the buy-in from the actual council.
I don't know that I have anything profound to say in that arena. I feel like we have, as a department, we have good relationships with council and with the mayor's office. And I do feel like there is a level of respect there. I think the hard thing is, in my description of our department, I called us squishy. I like that word. I feel like we're soft. I mean, we're about relationships. We're about building trust, building community, building relationships. We're not like a hard and fast Seattle Department of Transportation. We don't do infrastructure. We don't do kind of tangible products. We really are squishy. And I think when it comes to budget, that's always the stuff that is at the bottom of the pile. And it's, and I'm used to that world because I came from the arts sector. And it's like, if there's anything that's always at the bottom of the pile in terms of budget, it's arts. And as frustrating as that is, I've kind of learned to just like, well, I have to live with that. But so I think it's challenging. I mean, we're a small department compared to a lot of the other departments. We have a small budget. We're able to do a lot with what we have, but yeah, if I had an answer to how to get more budget from city council, or I would probably be making a lot more money than I am right now.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat. Just, do you send out surveys to find out more information throughout the city?
We have done quite a bit of surveying in the past. As a communications team, we haven't done it a lot recently. It's something that I may want to do, especially around the Reimagine Seattle story work that we did. Because one of the things that I'm struggling with right now, and before, you know, I started this by saying that I feel like we're always failing in a way. This is about experimentation, and it's about trying, and it's about trying to be better and do better and learn as you go. Some of the stuff that, you know, I've been challenged on with this work that we're doing with Reimagine Seattle is, you know, someone did ask me, like, do you feel like you're just exploiting these people? And I stopped and I was like, oh my God, I don't think so. It's not my intention. I mean, I didn't try to control what they said. I didn't try to control the work. I laid out very loose parameters. I paid them. But at the same time, I'm hosting them on our own department's blog and social media. So in a way, I'm kind of using their stories to reflect on us. And I was like, that's a really good question. And then I had to ask myself, okay, what is the ultimate end goal of this work? Is it just to share their stories, or are you going to actually do anything about the stories that they shared? And again, to get back to that, how does it reach the systems level? What is the actual change that you're trying to find? And so one of the things that I'm doing right now is, you know, we have made a decision to continue with this kind of storytelling work, maybe shifting the focus a little bit. But for the ones that we've already received, we're starting to catalog what some of them said, and especially in terms of what they want to see change in the city, the future they want to see. And I'm documenting that, and then I'm going to take it to a larger team here at the department to say, how can we track this? How can we say, take some of this information and go, how can we implement it in a staff level here at our department to try to get to these changes? And then on a public level, how can we start to track these changes and be transparent about, is the city actually accomplishing this? And maybe even doing follow-up stories with some of these people to kind of see the navigation of and the progression of their hopes and what they would hope to see changed. So yeah, I don't even remember what got me on that topic, but it is an ever-changing, ever-learning process. And I think it's important to never lose sight of that, you know, one of the things that I've been saying to my team a lot as we navigate all this work and really, as a team, try to be anti-racist in everything that we do, is understanding that this is not about winning. There's no winning in that. We just have to try to be better, and we have to try to learn on a regular basis and hear the feedback from people, hear when people call us in, and just not get defensive and just learn from it. And it's hard, but that's what we're really trying to kind of lean into right now. And this project has been a big, big part of that.
That's fantastic. I think some of the things you've offered today around leaning into risks and leaning into action and allowing community to hold that driver's seat has been really important. I know it's given me a lot to think about. I noticed, Rachel, you had your hand up. Rachel Hendry.
Just kind of real quick, going off the comment that I made in the chat, kind of as neighbors or people from different neighborhoods are hearing the stories or reading or seeing on social media the stories of people in other neighborhoods, how is that kind of building connection or changing things? Whether it's around people in different neighborhoods or seeing common threads of goals that they'd like to see, or kind of realizing that there's more connection than there might have seemed to be before.
I think that's a hard one to track. For me, what I go back to is it's an accumulation. So I don't think it's something that's going to change overnight or change anything in a real tangible way right away, but it's an accumulation and an exposure and a representation. So I think the more that we hear stories of other people's lived experience, and the more we're allowed to open ourselves to that, and the more we all get to experience what life is like in other people's shoes, I feel like that is what's ultimately going to transform us. So often we get caught in and I feel like COVID has changed this in many ways, but so often we get caught in our own little bubbles, and it's hard for people. I mean, all you need to see is the state of America over the last 4 years to know how devastating the impacts of that can be. So I think the more that this sharing and this amplifying of stories from all different communities, it's not going to change anything overnight, but it is going to be this kind of slow accumulation. And I do feel like I have sensed in our city that there is this, I do feel like we've reached a sense of a tipping point, that maybe things will start to shift and start to change. I certainly feel that at the city, and I hope I'm not just being too optimistic, but I do see a shift in things, particularly in the way that the city has been functioning as a government. I really am seeing that start to change in a way that could be fairly profound if we stay on track. But you never know.
Thank you.
Risha, I see you've got your hand up.
Thanks so much, Sam. My head is spinning with how wonderful all of this is. And I was imagining something, so I just thought I'd share it with you. I was just reflecting back on one of the very first things that you did was you kind of showed that, like, here's the data on Sam, but that is not your story. And I love, like, I've just been thinking about that and the narrative and the way that you're encouraging and facilitating the opportunity for people to share the narrative. And I'm wondering, as you talk about, so what's next with those stories, how cool it would be to drill that down even further, to have you talked about themes and those stories and how that might shift and change systems. And I wonder what it would look like if you gathered up some of those people to help actually drill down into what those themes are, and then for them to share those themes, and just to continue to let it, then it's like the narrative of the narrative. I don't know if that sounds crazy, but I just was thinking about how powerful that potentially could be, to continue to allow that opportunity for the people of the city to change sort of the machine of the city.
Yeah, no, that is really a good point. And it's something that I actually was thinking about a few months ago, when someone brought up that exploitation question. One of the things I thought about after the fact was how could we transform that group of storytellers into an actual cohort of people that we work with on a regular basis. It's still a nugget in my head in terms of like the budget and resources to actually tackle something like that. That's where I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea how I would even pull that off. Because ultimately, I still don't even know how I pulled off the budget to get done what we got done. I just made stuff up, and I started with a very small amount of money, and I thought I could talk to maybe 5 people and have 5 stories. And then I pitched it to my boss and the other people on Seattle Together, and they were able to scrape up more money. So it kind of, people latched onto the idea, and I was able to get more money to pull that off. But in terms of creating a cohort and being able to compensate that cohort for the value they're bringing would be such a much larger undertaking that I get a little daunted by that. But I totally hear you. In a perfect world, I've been thinking about that as well.
I just want to say that I really appreciate just in this conversation what you just referenced around like compensating folks who are participating in these processes. I think that that's so important and often forgotten in this work. And I just wanted to nod to how fantastic that is. And any further questions? All right. So something that we like to do in these spaces is flip things over to small breakout rooms because we missed the mingling opportunity that came up when we were together in real life. So with that in mind, I'm just going to stop the live stream now.